Okay, imagine just for a moment that I'm your coach and I've told you to forget everything. No power meter, no heart rate, no data at all. Just go out, find your limit and hold it there. Keep the tension in the chain, full commitment, absolutely bury yourself. What does that actually mean and why would I ask you to do it? Most cyclists have become really good at following numbers, hitting targets, executing intervals, the perfect client for so many coaches, but they've become terrible at reading their own bodies. And when that race or event doesn't go to plan, when it's hotter than expected, or you're more fatigued, or perhaps somebody attacks early, you need to regulate effort without the safety net of your head unit telling you what to do. So occasionally, we train that skill. First question, what does bury yourself even mean? Because there's bury yourself for 3 minutes, there's bury yourself for 20, there's bury yourself for 2 hours. Completely different efforts. The limit you're finding is entirely duration dependent. Let's say it's the stains, 20, 30, 40 minutes, long enough that pacing actually matters. No numbers. So what are you reading? Yourself. Breathing rate becomes your primary feedback. If you can still form sentences, you're not there yet. If you're down to single words or grunts, you've probably gone over. The sweet spot is 2 to 3 word bursts, rhythm breaking up, but still controlled. Now your legs will tell you something different depending where you are in the effort. Early on, you feel tension, discomfort. That's not the limit. That's just waking up. That's because you haven't warmed up. The actual limit is when the burn shifts, when it goes from general heaviness to that specific bite in the quads, when pedaling starts to feel like you're pushing through something thicker than air. And critically, when your brain starts negotiating with you, maybe just back it off 5%, you can hold it longer. That negotiation, that's the sign you're in the zone. So what's happening here? Physiologically and psychologically, there's this concept called interoception, your awareness of internal bodily signals, how accurately you can sense your heart rate, your breathing, the accumulation of fatigue. Turns out cyclists vary massively in this. Some are really good at it. They feel small changes in effort, make tiny corrections early on. Others need the pain to properly arrive before they trust they're working hard enough. There's research from Butterworth showing that cyclists with poor interoceptive accuracy can't differentiate between easy and hard efforts in self-paced time trials. They start both too aggressively. They're using what's called a drive to awareness strategy. Overshoot early to generate signals intense enough to register clearly. Big fluctuations before they trust the feedback and adjust. Contrast that with someone who has fine interoceptive acuity. They engage in anticipatory regulation, small corrections based on subtle cues before the drastic signals force their hand. So when I tell you to bury yourself with no data, I'm training that skill. You have to learn to read breathing rate, leg burn, mental negotiation in real time without external anchors. There's another layer, perceived effort, RPE, rating of perceived exertion. Now it's not perfectly correlated with any single physiological signal. It's integrative though. Your brain is combining heart rate, lactate accumulation, muscle recruitment, core temperature, glycogen depletion, psychological factors like motivation, how much longer you think you have to go, and packaging all that up into one sensation. This feels hard. Studies show that in time trials, athletes primarily pace according to perceived exertion and the expected endpoint, not strictly in response to real-time biological feedback. There's classic work where cyclists performed identical time trials but believed the distances were different. Pacing differed with the believed distance, yet final exhaustion always coincided with reaching a similar peak of perceived effort. Not when a specific heart rate was hit, not when lactate reached a threshold, when the conscious perception of effort reached maximum. Effort perception acts like a central governor. It's the thing that actually determines when you slow down or stop, which means training your ability to accurately gauge and control efforts is fundamental to pacing. Right, so why no data? Isn't technology helpful? Yes, absolutely. Power meters and heart rate monitors are incredibly useful. They quantify improvement, help manage load, let you execute structured sessions at appropriate intensities. But there's research from Hettinger showing that experienced cyclists in a 20-kilometer time trial performed equally well with full feedback as with no feedback at all. They had the same finish times. Different pacing profiles. The feedback group definitely saved something for the end, probably because they could see distance remaining. The no feedback group paced more evenly without that sharp kick at the end. Now, both groups rated that perceived exertion similarly, finished equally fatigued, So what's this tell us? When you're experienced and you know the task, internal cues alone are sufficient to regulate effort for maximal performance. But most cyclists have become dependent on feedback. They've trained themselves to hit numbers, not to feel effort. So if the device fails mid-race or conditions change, the relationship between power and effort, heat, wind, fatigue, they misjudge badly. They blow up because they're rigidly sticking to a wattage that's unsustainable today, or they underperform because they don't trust themselves to push hard without the numbers telling them it's okay. Training without data occasionally forces calibration. You have to tune in, pay attention, learn what sustainably hard actually feels like in your body, not just on a screen. The controversial bit. What if I get this wrong? What if I go out too hard and blow up? Is that a wasted session? No. Actually, that's where some of the best learning happens. Pacing is a skill and it develops through trial and error, like any motor skill. There's a systematic review from Menting showing that athletes progressively learn to fit their effort distribution to task demands through repeated exposure. Novices exhibit erratic pacing. Some start too conservatively, others too aggressively and crater. With practice, they converge on more even, effective strategies. Early failures teach valuable lessons. You learn what too fast or too hard feels like. The warning signs, the negotiation phase where your brain starts offering deals. Next time you recognize those signals earlier, just before the collapse. There's also physiological components. Occasionally, exposure to very hard efforts, finishing sessions in a state of severe fatigue, can improve your resistance to central fatigue, the decline in neural drive during prolonged exercise. You become better at mobilizing remaining energy, maintaining form, functioning under extreme discomfort because you've been there before. It's not novel, not scary, not hard, and you know you can handle hard. But, and this is critical, you don't make this frequent. Blowing up in training has diminishing returns, high strain, long recovery. Do it too often, you risk overtraining, injury, loss of confidence. We use maximal effort sparingly, purposely to benchmark, to teach a specific lesson, to inoculate against race day and event day panic, not as part of your staple training diet. So here's where it comes together. Optimal pacing isn't purely internal or purely external. It's the integration of both. You use data-informed targets as guardrails, but you can calibrate those against how you feel. If your power meter says 250 watts, but it feels pretty hard today, maybe it's hot, maybe you're under-recovered. A purely data-driven approach pushes you to hold that power until you crack. A more intuitive athlete eases off early, recognizes from perceived effort that today, 250 is unsustainable. Conversely, if you feel like really strong, strict adherence to a predetermined cap might underutilize your capacity. The best athletes subjectively interpret objective data. They see a higher than planned heart rate mid-race and discern whether this signal is unsustainable effort or just a temporary spike from adrenaline, by cross-referencing with perceived exertion, breathing rate, leg sensation. This cognitive flexibility, reconciling what the head, heart, and device are each saying, is a hallmark of elite pacing. You train it by occasionally forcing yourself to operate without one of those inputs. No data, just feel. So let me put my coach's hat on for a second. Why would I actually prescribe this? There's a few reasons. You're about to race and I want to know what you've got. Numbers tell me your fitness, they don't tell me how you access it under pressure. And no data maximal effort shows me how you pace when it matters. Do you go out too hard? Do you sit up too early? Do you panic when it hurts? Or do you find the limit and hold it? That's information I can't get from a structured interval session. You've been training by numbers for months and you've lost touch with feel. This happens. You get so good at executing 280 watts for 20 minutes that you forget what 280 watts feels like. You're just watching a number. If I take that number away and you can't find that effort, we've got a problem. You've outsourced your pacing to a wahoo. You're coming back from a break and I want to recalibrate. Fitness has changed. The old numbers don't apply. Rather than guess what your new threshold is, I'd rather you find it. Go out, bury yourself for 20 minutes, see what you've got. Now we have a reference point that's current, based on today, and not 6 weeks ago. And this isn't an FTP test. It takes that mental strain off of it. All you're doing is riding your bike fast. Maybe you're someone who races cautiously and leaves too much in the tank. Some riders need permission to hurt. They hold back, always something in reserve. A session like this forces commitment. You can't hide behind, I was just hitting my numbers. There's nowhere to hide. You either went to the well or you didn't. Perhaps you've just never done it. It sounds simple, but it matters. If you've never found your limit without data, you don't actually know where it is. You know where your numbers say it is, and that's a different thing. At some point, you need to go there for real. So when this shows up in your plan, that's why. It's not punishment, it's not random suffering, it's a specific tool for a specific reason. So if you do time trials, think about this. How often have you picked a number to hold? 290 watts, 310, whatever it is, you've decided before you start what you're going to do, and then you spend the whole effort staring at the screen trying to hold it. And sometimes that works, but sometimes you're chasing a number that isn't available today, or you're leaving watts on the table because you set the target too conservatively. Remember what it used to be like before power meters? Yes, there was a time. People still race time trials, they still pace them well. Some of the best time trialists in history never saw a power meter, like never saw watts mid-race. They went by feel, breathing, legs, how much of the road was left. Alex Dowsett, one of the greatest time trialists this country has ever produced, our record holder, multiple national champion, after he retired from the world tour, he took the power meter off his TT book. Think about that for a second. Someone who could have every metric, every data point, every piece of feedback chose to remove it because he wanted to race by feel again, because he'd spent so long as a pro watching numbers that he'd forgotten what it was like just to race. I'm not saying throw your power meter away, but if one of the best time trialists in British history thinks there's value in riding without it, maybe there's something there. The point is that if data is a tool and you can't function without that tool, you have a dependency problem, not a skill. Occasionally put the tool away, put it back in the box and see what's left. So how do you program this? Not every ride needs to be a data-free sufferfest, but maybe once every few weeks you do a sustained effort, 20, 30, 40 minutes, an hour of power where you cover the head unit and you're searching for that limit, the point where breathing fragments, where legs bite, where your brain starts negotiating with you and you hold it there. Afterwards, you look at the data. How close were you to threshold power? To your known sustainable efforts? Did you overshoot early and fade, or did you finish with gas in the tank? That comparison, how it felt versus what you actually did, tightens calibration over time. Your internal sense of this is threshold starts to align with the external reality of threshold power. You could also do it intervals by LPE. Ride this climb at what feels like a 8 or 9 out of 10, only afterwards check, was it actually 8 or 9 out of 10 effort? Over months, you get better at this. Your subjective rating corresponds to a consistent fraction of your capacity, which means when you race or ride far and conditions aren't perfect, when heat spikes your heart rate, when fatigue makes every watt feel harder, you can adjust appropriately because you've trained the skill of reading your own body, not just following orders from a computer. A few things to learn before we close. This isn't a license to destroy yourself. Data is still valuable for most of your training. Structure definitely matters and recovery matters even more. There are individual differences in interoceptive ability, which means some athletes find this easier than others. If you're someone who needs big signals before you trust the feedback, that's okay. You might need more practice, might need shorter efforts to start. And the specific duration matters. Bury yourself for 3 minutes, that's anaerobic capacity. Bury yourself for 30 is threshold tolerance. Different systems, different sensations, different lessons. Start with durations you know, efforts where you have some sense of the numbers, and then compare. So when I tell you to forget the power, the heart rate, all the data, to just go out and bury yourself, I'm not being sadistic. I'm not dismissing the value of metrics. I'm asking you to develop the other half of the equation, the internal regulation that makes you a complete athlete. Someone who can race with technology or without it. Someone who can execute a plan but also deviate intelligently when the plan meets reality. And someone who trusts the numbers but trusts themselves more. Because at the end of the day, when you're deep in a ride and everything hurts and you're trying to decide whether to hold on or ease off, the power meter can tell you what you're doing, but only you can tell you what you can sustain. And train that. Saddle up cycling.co.uk if you want to get in touch. Saddle up and just don't look at the screen. Cheers. Bye-bye.